particular commitments in the programme for government that you feel will help us propel us towards the development of a public model of early childhood education and care?
Do I need to use this? Do I need to? Yeah. Do I? Am I on? I think I am.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for inviting Early Childhood Ireland, and of course, like a lot of other people in the room this morning and this afternoon, it's hard not to fangirl over the esteemed Professor Eva Lloyd. We adore her. So delighted that you're involved in the Irish system now. You're welcome. It's meant sincerely on behalf of the whole organisation. So, look, having said that, now I'm going to get all negative and annoy people, but I need to tell you, as the Director of Policy for Early Childhood Ireland, when I opened the programme for government, I felt like a complete failure. I had to keep my chin up for the team, some of whom are in the room, because the previous programme for government, we'd had a huge success in that we'd gotten the single agency into it, and we were delighted with ourselves. And there were other things in it. This time, I think probably with a bit more time to put on my big girl pants, I don't cry out when I open it anymore. I didn't cry during Hazel's presentation. But I do think for us, that focus on fees, the obsession with fees in particular, and the access issue, even though we would talk about both all the time, particularly around access, actually it's just very depressing to see the lack of detail and timelines in it. And I suppose also, you know, where are the children? Where's quality for children? It's absolutely within the department. I want to say that very clearly. But within government, you know, we meet politicians all the time. And particularly now, we have a very new Oireachtas, a new Dáil, lots of new members, including who've been given the children's portfolio by their leader, and they're excellent. But you talk to them about quality and their eyebrows go up. You're literally the first person who has spoken to them about it. And that's quite worrying. The previous time that we would have cried was when the exit poll for the general election, no mention of early years and school age care, were swept into the cost of living. Again, I want to scream. It's not a cost of living issue. And as a former chairwoman of the National Women's Council, I'm allowed to say this without getting lynched. It's not really a women's issue either. It really is a children's issue. And we don't see it like that as a society. And I think if we were, and we work very hard to do that, to try and flip the thinking about it. So after a few months' reflection, I suppose, it's been interesting to watch. Again, there was devastation the day of the budget. As far as we're concerned, it was standing still money. So I suppose our jury is still out. The potential is there, and I'm not just saying this because a senior official is sitting beside me. This is absolutely, I want to make it clear about the elected government is who we have the difficulty with. Like Eva, we completely recognise First Five is a brilliant document. Thank God it's there. Thank God successive governments have bought into it and not fought against it. Similarly, all of the other reports that Eva mentioned, we're seeing a backlash now against the Childminding Action Plan. That's disgraceful. Again, this should be about children. So I suppose we're still very on the fence. We're working away, though, to try and get that detail. Very keen to see the action plan, but we need to see new investment targets. We definitely need to see more about staffing. That's hugely related to quality. And of course we need to see more places. Of course we do. But with all the great ambition in the world, we're not going to get them if we don't address the staffing issue.
Okay, great. Thanks, Frances. And maybe we'll go on to Dara, Michelle and Naomi and come back to you, Hazel, if that's okay.
Okay,
so just reflecting on that again, what's the provision that's in the programme for government, the planning that Hazel has spoken about, but then Frances raises issues around pay, recognition, terms and conditions of employment, workforce, all of these. Would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much. So maybe just to start off with, so I work for SIB2, which is home to the Early Years Union. So we're not an advocacy organisation, we're a democratic union. So we're thousands of members all over the country in community and private services, managers, educators, room leaders, they're members of ours. They have an elected national committee, and we have conferences, and we set out our policies. So that's just to kind of draw that distinction. I don't look into my heart and imagine what early years educators need. Right? We go out and we talk to people. And from the beginning of the campaign, which is around 10 years now, where we really went for it, we've been quite clear and affirmed it again and again of what our guiding light was. And that is very familiar to people in the room here. It's high quality, affordable, accessible early years. And certainly it was a former employee of the CRA, I think now with yourselves, Liz Cairns, who really highlighted and drew attention to me of taking a children's rights approach to informing our thinking. So we always have like big discussions and good arguments, and I think you never go wrong when you bring it back to the children's rights perspective. There's a question though, is like, how do you vindicate those rights? I think that's a really important piece, and particularly when we talk about the quality. We know that quality is driven by the interactions of skilled, qualified educators with those children. Great. And we have minimum qualifications, but where we see the big problem is that there is a really high level of staff turnover in the sector. It's dizzying high in some areas. So on average, across community and private, it's 25%. But when you go into larger private services, say in Dún Laoghaire, the staff turnover is on average 62%, on average. So that means there's places that are close to 100% and ones that are much lower as well. And that's just very disruptive, because if you think of that quality of the relationship, if it changes every 6 months or so, right, you're not able to kind of find those bonds there. So why is that? Right? So you have to go out and you have to talk to people and figure out, well, what's happening? And obviously, paying conditions are a big driving factor. Now, there's been huge advances made, right? There's been, those campaigns and lobbying and days of action and all that kind of stuff, where some people, and particularly graduates, have seen pay increases of up to 50 or 60% in the last 3 years. So from 2022, when the first pay deal came in, to just a couple of months ago. So certainly, there's been good advancements there. Those 60% pay deal, I might think I'm doing a really good job, right, with doing that bit. That speaks more to the poverty pay that was there for graduates, and graduate managers included, right? So there's a long way to go to be able to catch up. But we do have a mechanism to improve pay, and there is improvements there. It hasn't gone far enough yet, but there is a bit of a path. And what's needed then is investment from the state to be able to keep that going. But I would say, with an eye to a public system and what that means, and there's kind of different ideas around it as well, I think a part of it has to be around the value for money. So in our high quality, affordable, accessible, I almost would put in value for money on the other end of it as well. And that we know that the current system is leaky, right? We put a lot of money into a leaky bucket, and when it comes to pay and other elements of the sector, a lot of it kind of spills out as well. And certainly our vision for how to shift to a public system is that you move to the primary school model, where the state would fund the wages. So there's a really clear line of sight, there's no messing. Every euro for pay goes directly to pay, and I think it would bring a lot of stability into the sector. There's quite a lot of support amongst private providers, and educators are really up for it. A lot of private providers, although not all, are up for it. Certainly, I think a lot of community providers are up for it as well. Just one piece on accessibility. There's the chef in the creche that my kid goes to. She brings out the food, and little saying, you get what you get and you don't get upset. And that is quite similar to how early years is provided in Ireland at the moment as well. You get what you get. It's not about what the needs of the family or the needs of the child. It's about what's profitable for a private provider or what's sustainable for a community provider as well. So, like the state, notwithstanding what's in the programme for government and developments, if we're talking about children's and families' access as a core value or a right for the sector, how do you vindicate that right? And that does necessitate more direct state involvement as well. Someone's got to say, this is what children and families need, and this is what we're going to do to it. And as Eve was talking about, the range of flexible options that are there to suit the needs of children and family. So I think that's another part of it, and a couple of different ways you might do that, either through direct provision or changing that relationship between the state and the public-private partnership. What is it that it's not there for the benefit of early years educators, who I represent, or providers? The system has to deliver for the needs of children and families.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dara. Michelle, the National Childhood Network carried out workshops in 2023 to reimagine a sustainable model of early childhood education and care, and to better understand the range of issues that create barriers. And we've heard about some of those in small and medium settings, including from Regina earlier, in the current system. So what were some of the findings that came from the research, and what's your view about some of the solutions that would help the sector going forward?
Thank you very much. I suppose we carried this research out, and we had a mixture of both community settings and independently managed services. It was a small number, and it was facilitated by DCU. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the first thing in relation to that was, the research engaged owner-managers of, as you say, small to medium settings to understand the pressures created by rapid policy change, which we talked about this morning, and particularly the impact of the core funding model. And some of the things that came out of that was in relation to the funding structure and how that places disproportionate strain on small to medium providers around administration, financial and governance requirements that are identical for small and large organisations, which, but they don't have the same economies of scale, despite their major capacity differences. The other pieces that came out were in relation to the administration burden, the extensive paperwork, the inspections, the reporting obligations, the bureaucracy and time away from children and from pedagogical leadership. So on one hand, the settings are trying to administer the schemes and all the paperwork that go with that, and then against the pedagogical leadership and the work that they're doing directly with children. And they felt that that was really having an impact on the quality of their setting, because they were having to choose between which one, keep the funding or look at the quality. Yeah. And I suppose there's something to pick up on now in terms of what you were saying, but also the lack of professional recognition. Yeah. And I think that is something that's very important, and something actually came up yesterday at a conference we were at. Some of it is wages, but some of it they want to feel valued as a profession, and they want to have their voice heard, and they want to have better conditions of employment, and they want to feel that they're going somewhere in their career. Yeah. Some of the other pieces was around the dependency on small providers that are structured, as I said before, sorry, I've said that already, policies that lack flexibility and needed to recognise local context, diversity of provision and community embedded provision. So those were some of the main things that came through, and I suppose some of the solutions that were coming through were in relation to visions that were grounded into actionable solutions. The idea that we would come together for authentic dialogue on an ongoing basis through different networks. A time to resource a strong, inclusive professional body, realistic pay scales and career pathways. And something I thought was very interesting was to create administration hubs to support small services. And we heard that this morning about the community hubs, but the settings are saying wrap the services around us, because we cannot continue like this and we are in danger. And actually I have seen letters, settings have sent me letters of those private equity firms trying to poach those small settings and take over their business, whether that was to put them out of business or whether that was to bring them in under that umbrella. So that is happening. Are we going to sleepwalk into that and let it happen? And just one final thing I want to say in relation to that. and you talked about it earlier, is in relation to the right of every child to have a place. And I wondered, if we went back to look at that, would that protect the settings? Would it protect them from those large equity corporations coming in and stop that from happening? Because we'd have to resource it and look at it in a very different lens.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Michelle. And Naomi, from a children's rights perspective then, what are the key developments needed to ensure that a move towards a public model has, you know, the best interests of the child right at its centre?
Thanks, Cliona. I suppose today I've been having a couple of reflections throughout the day, and I'm going to try and pull them into my input in response to that question, and well, we'll see how it works out. I suppose I'm thinking back to 12 months ago when we had a general election. We had all political parties coalesce around this one idea of, you know, maximum amount that people will pay each month for childcare. It was either €200 or for some people it was €50 per week. But everybody wanted to talk about this. And the second thing I was thinking about was, you know, the work that Dara and his colleagues have done around highlighting the issues of workers. And so when we think about the issue of early childhood education and care with those lenses in mind, we are very much not thinking about a child's rights approach. We're thinking about it as adult-centric. And why are we thinking about that? And it's adults' vote. That's the most critical thing. And that's why we have seen a coalesce around that issue of the maximum fee that adults would pay. So what would a child's rights-based approach? Well, if we go back to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the UN Committee, we can see in the general comment that what it says is a children's rights-based approach, particularly in early years, would ensure that those working with young children should be socially valued and properly paid in order to attract a highly qualified workforce. And as well, and it should include men as well as women. So not only is childcare should not be just a women's issue, but the workers should not just be women, it should be included men as well. And why I was thinking about these adult-centred ideas was really picking up something that Professor Marmot said this morning. All of the things that he talked about, very much a political response. We can see the trends, how we politically respond to social issues is important and what the outcomes are. So if we see that we're responding politically to this issue of affordability, we need to kind of rethink that a little bit. Not only is it about affordability, but how do we embed into that quality? And so what we think is really critical is in the first instance, when we think about that increased investment, that we look about how are we going to pay the workforce. So we can, if we invest publicly in services and ensure that workers are being paid by the government, that is going to be really, really critical. But as I was thinking about that point, listening to Eva's presentation, I did wonder, is that going to expose us to more marketised services coming in? And I think Regina and Michelle have really spoken to that. And I was telling Dara before we came on the panel after lunch, I'd actually gotten approached on LinkedIn by somebody, and it was a real random LinkedIn message that our lovely comms director said, Naomi, don't reply to it. But it was someone willing to pay me €450 to do a 1-hour interview, to give them details about what is the policy landscape in Ireland, because as I probed a little bit more, they wanted to inform their clients who were literally nursery chains from the UK coming in. So I suppose while we want to see this increased investment and a real commitment to paying workers in order to see a children's rights-based approach to the delivery of early childhood education and care, which we can see will tackle gender issues, will tackle workers' issues and workers' rights, we do need to be attuned to the things that Professor Lloyd has indicated. Is that going to expose us to more of that marketised approach within Ireland?
Okay, great. Thanks, Naomi. And Hazel, coming back to you then, some tensions, disappointments, but also opportunities underscored there by the 4 speakers. So have you any responses to that or reflections yourself?
yeah, I'm not going to comment just on what was in the programme for government or what wasn't. I suppose the programme for government is the programme for government. Having said that, I think there are significant opportunities within that, and particularly in light of the conversation about a public model in its broadest sense and advancing the kind of objectives that people here are talking about. I think, in particular, the €200 commitment, there's an awful lot of potential within that if you start unpicking that and considering what that really means. And it's very, very substantial. And whether it ultimately ends up being €200 or somewhere close, maybe not quite that far, that principle of having a standardised fee, I think, is very, very different to the position that we're currently in. And if you start working backwards from there, I think there's a lot of potential in that. The action plan, which is also a commitment in the programme for government, and the Minister has previously said that will be in 2 phases, the first one of which is I think forthcoming in the not too distant future, with the second one kind of looking further ahead and a consultation to accompany that. I think that is a huge opportunity, and a huge opportunity to, as I said, unpick kind of that standardised parental contribution element of the programme for government commitments and what can be delivered on foot of that. The other point, though, I just wanted to pick up on, not to be too argumentative, but the focus on fees as part of the general election, like there is a kind of parental workforce element to that, but I don't think we can divorce that from like the children's rights and children, like the disadvantaged child poverty question, right? Because the hugely variable fee levels are a very real and significant barrier to children's access, and like that's fundamental. Like so all the talk that we're important, of course, like fundamental questions about quality. The children can only benefit from that if they can access a service, and that is about places, and that is about places being available in an affordable way for families. And it's not just about parents' workforce participation, although that is part of it as well, and family income and all of that kind of thing. So I don't think we should dismiss that kind of debate about fees and affordability as just being about parents or just being about better off parents. That's part of it, but I think it has wider reaching implications as well. So yeah, just I suppose on the kind of question, the opportunities of the programme for government and where we're going and kind of key elements, I'd say like the action plan, and really to have a think about the kind of standardised parental co-payment question, and what that means for the sector as a whole if we're to move in that direction.
Okay, great. Thanks, Hazel. Okay, I'm just conscious of time, your time, but also of the opportunity to ask the panel some questions. So can we take a couple of questions?
Thank you very much for that discussion. It's very interesting to hear the different perspectives on things. I suppose my question is directly to Hazel. Hazel, we need a meaningful, as providers, a meaningful engagement with the department. And we need to have our voices heard, not just listened to, but actually heard and actioned on. Because a lot of the time we bring forward our challenges, and we get a lot of empathy, but we need action on a real partnership as providers with the department going forward. And we need a core funding, core funding that will actually work for the sector and for everybody in the sector, for our employees and for those people who have invested in them in services all their lives. And we definitely need the workforce development plan very urgently. We absolutely need that going forward to work for the sector. And yes, Dara, pay and conditions are so important to everything going forward, but that is really all down onto core funding as to what is coming in the future in that, and we really don't know what is. So there is a lot of stress there in the sector. Now, I'm not taking away from the fact there are huge positivities. National Childcare Scheme is great. That the children that can avail of ECCE is absolutely marvellous. And children with disabilities, and I'm sorry I missed this morning's session for reasons beyond my control, but I would love to have heard, all the conversations that went on around that. But I do know, and I know personally ourselves in Grovelands Childcare, we pick up children from the most disadvantaged areas and bring them into our centres. And that is happening all over the country as well, and that is a great positive story. But I mean, the most positive thing is seeing children going out of care and early education sectors prepared and well prepared for starting into the school programme. So there have been huge positivities in the sector, but we absolutely, for the future of children's education, and we all know it starts, what they learn in the first 3 to 5 years of their lives is hugely important. We need to ensure that we have a stable sector there, and we need to ensure we have the right people working with children. That is hugely important, and it's hugely important for us to look at how we can actually look at the pathways into the sector and have people working with children who really enjoy their job. And it's up to all of us to ensure that people working in the sector do actually enjoy their jobs every day, and we need to relieve the stress of administration big time. Okay. Because that is hugely impacting services. I know people have had a long day here. I don't want to take up an awful lot of time, but it is, and from myself and from Shasuis, and I know I'm the chair of Childcare Services Ireland as well, I should have mentioned that, we definitely want to continue working with the stakeholders in the sector to ensure that we have a very stable and, what would I say, a sector that will grow and that the children will have the best experiences that they can have. And yes, that women and men can go to work as well. We need to, they rely on us being there every day of the week for them, and particularly in areas where we have essential workers. It's hugely important. We saw what happened during COVID. So it is really, really important. So, from our point of view, we certainly want to work with everybody. But we need the department to work with us and listen to what we're saying. Because too often things happened and we had to go back and look at them and support. Whereas if we were asked and listened to at the time when policy was being developed, things could have been completely different. And I mean that for a lot of stakeholders here in the room, because some of us think the same.
Great.
So thank you very much for the conversation.
Thanks,
this
Regina.
evening.
Okay, wonderful. Any other comment
Hello.
or question? Yes.
Hi, Sinead Jones is my name. Just a comment, really. Thank you, Professor Eva Lloyd, and everybody else today. It's been a great day. I'm a manager of one of the family resource centres, Hillview in Ballantyre. But this is really interesting for me because in my many years before that, I was a private provider, Marie Montessori, one of my gods out there with you guys as well. And private sector before moving to the community sector. I suppose, just not to go into it too much, but with all of this discussion as well, and with the department, much respect for everyone involved, wanting the best for our children and for our families on a national and international way. It's lovely to hear the UK and everybody here, and so inspired by the Nordic countries. Let's face it, we're going to say it. James Heckman, the economist, it's about money when it comes down to it. So if we're in the community sector or if we're a private provider, we're looking at a 3-year sort of business plan model. We don't like to talk about this at all, but sort of we have to. I would be an advocate, and have been for many years through my career, of a public model. And one thing that I'd like to bring into that as well would be a committee of all of our early years services to have the parents' voice as well. So I think that's missing out in so many of the, like if we were to do, I don't know if it's been done in Ireland, but if you look at all of the registered childcare providers, how many of those providers and services have the parents' voice and the community's voice in their location as well? That's something I would really love to see as well. But thanks so much, everyone. What a buzz.
Thanks so much. Would any of you like to respond to those two remarks? Yeah, Dara, and then Michelle. Yeah.
Grant, thanks very much. I think there's really kind of interesting contributions there. And one of the things, whenever I meet with workers, I say, there's one stock phrase and you're going to get it as well. Workers don't get what they deserve, they get what they can fight for. And just because we've got really good arguments, and we do, and just because we think we're right, and we are, doesn't mean we can actually change anything. And really, because lots of other people have arguments and there's demands on government budgets, and they're right, and they make really good arguments as well. So it's a matter about being able to apply the pressure to bring about the change that we need to see. And I agree with Francis, the programme for government was very disappointing, right? It wasn't I don't think it was cohesive, and it didn't set out a vision, certainly. But there are opportunities there, and the action plan is going to be launched in the next kind of month or so. And there's an opportunity there for us as a sector, because if we want to be fighting fit and to be able to win, we've got to do some very specific things. We need to have a clear vision of the people in this room, and I think we share broadly what our vision is, right? The high quality, affordable, accessible, that's fine. I think if you share that, that's the kind of gets you into the room. But we need to be able to hammer out a common campaign platform. What is it that we want to see happening? And we have to be really clear about that. And we saw that in the election, not the last one, but the one before it as well, when we had 30,000 people out on the streets under a very clear, coherent campaign platform. And we had really good success. And there was that protest and lobbying by lots of different organisations to bring about a really, really good programme for government and really good budgets. So I think that's incumbent on us as leaders in the sector, is to be able to come around the table and figure out, okay, have those hard conversations, and they are hard conversations, there's tantrums and there's giving out, but that's what you have to do to be able to get your platform. That's not enough though. We have to be able to build organisations that can effectively campaign and put the pressure on. And we need that from a worker's point of view, from the educators need to build their strong union, that's their democratic organisation where they're able to go out and campaign and put that pressure on. The same for providers. We as a union, we need a good, strong providers organisation, an employers organisation that we can work with. Because we know that when those groups are working together, we can put the pressure on the government, rather than the union taking strips out of the employers and the employers taking strips out of the union, and then the government are getting off scot-free. So that's a huge problem. So that we need to be able to have those spaces for those two sides of the coin to be able to build that infrastructure. And there are issues there of workers getting organised and unionised within the sector, and people being persuaded and pressure being put on as well. We need to sort that out. And certainly the parents' voice is a kind of a key piece. So you can hear the legs of the stool. It's the parents' voice, the children's rights voice, workers and providers. And if those people can figure it out, then you've got something, you've got the magic potion that you need. And there is gaps, there is spaces to be able to influence what happens within the government. And I think one of the big threats that we have is if we don't do it, well, what's happening at the moment is that we're sleepwalking our way towards corporate childcare. And Eva's been, really articulate and, about what happens and what that means. And I believe certainly from a union point of view, people don't want to see that happening, right? Our members are adamant about it. I think a lot of private providers are really, you don't want to see that happening, and certainly community providers as well. But it'll be up to us if we allow it. We'll have to take our share of the blame if we allow that to happen as well. So we have to step up, figure out what it is that we want, and then go out and fight for it.
Great, thanks, Dara. And Shell?
Yeah, just finally, just want to address that lady there in relation to the parental and actually community involvement. We're running a cross-border programme at the minute for peace and reconciliation because we're based in Monaghan, and we're bringing together early childhood settings,
preschool settings with difference. So they might be Catholic Protestant, they might be of newcomer families, they might be in areas of disadvantage. And we're bringing together families within local communities to build that community engagement and co-construct and co-share that idea of learning together. And that is really making a difference, not just to the children who ordinarily within their settings, but particularly in the areas of disadvantage. So there's lots of ways that we can build this space. There's lots of ways we can bring parental engagement in, but we need to sort out the issues around the administration burden because that is weighing down on the providers. And we need to make sure that that is, because they can do the things that they really want to do and move into a different space. And obviously we want to keep the conversations going in relation to, how we're going to move all this forward.
Great, thanks for that optimistic note there, Michelle. And Hazel, I'll hand this over.
Great, thanks. So just to come back on a few points, I suppose, there are various consultation forums within the department, stakeholder forum, a fairly new provider forum that's been committed to, and it's now in operation. The admin simplification plan has been in development. The administrative simplification plan has been in development for some time, and I understand that the publication of that is imminent. I think that kind of speaks to points that a few people raised. And I suppose the other point, just to come back again and reiterate the commitment in relation to the action plan, but most particularly the consultation to accompany that. As I said, the action plan will be in 2 phases, with the consultation to inform the phase 2 part of it. And I think that's a very significant opportunity. And I suppose opening up a conversation with the sector about what the future of the sector, and the sector in its broadest sense, I mean, providers, workers, parents and children's representatives, to inform and shape what the future of the sector is going to look like. And just to welcome as well the point from the other speaker there about parents' committees. I remember hearing about Norwegian requirements in Norway for parents' committees many years ago, and I thought it was a great idea. I'd love to see that as part of the system.
Great. Thanks, Hazel. And last word on the panel to Frances, and then I might go to Eva, just a surprise visit, to have your final thoughts and reflections, having heard the panel.
Thanks very much. I did indeed put my big girl pants on and work out what 200 a month would mean in terms of investment, just to say that. And we found that it fell very short of what's needed for pay parity. So we've had interesting discussions with politicians about that. I suppose Hazel's excellent point about consultation is one of the things I wanted to say. I suppose we get asked, and we're ready for it, what would you do? What would you do if you were the Minister for Children? And I say, no, I'd rather be the Taoiseach. So I could give a minister the head to be a Donagh O'Malley for early years and school-age care. Most of us in the room were beneficiaries of Donagh O'Malley. Even if you don't know, go and ask your parents or look it up. So we need that vision. We need the vision to answer all of the questions that have been raised. And I think the governance question in particular. So if you are that politician with a vision, whether you're the Taoiseach or whoever you are, what are you talking about and when? So is it a model that looks like national schools? Is it public-private partnerships? Tell us. And then consult with everybody. And the only group I would add is consult with children as well. The government has already done that very effectively many times. It's brilliant. And acknowledge that this isn't a brownfield site. This isn't Norway back in the 1950s and 60s, but we did have settings here in Ireland back then. So all of those people have important voices and perspectives. So we're not going to get there without enormous change, and we all have to acknowledge that. I think we do. I don't think anyone's in denial about that.
So that it's that combination of vision and the journey, and being brave about that. The final thing I just want to say though is, and having spoken about children's rights, I'm going to sound like I'm contradicting myself. I'm not. We just need to be very careful about putting, and I know nobody's suggesting this, but I just need to say it out loud, our energy or our eggs in the one basket of fighting for the right to. Everybody in this room either has a child in your life or knows of a child in your life who has a right to a primary school and hasn't vindicated that right in the place that they deserve in the appropriate way. So I'm just saying that word of caution about, us being very, very clear-headed about seeking the additional investment and what it's for in the context of children vindicating their rights and not just fighting for a nominal right that may never be vindicated. Probably sound really patronising, but I just really worry about that one. I just think we need to be very clear about what's happened to date in Ireland in relation to children's rights, looking great on paper and then us not seeing them. We see it, we heard it this morning as well, mental health, homelessness, everything.
Super. Thank you. Thanks, Francis. Okay, wonderful. Eva, you still got your
mic? I have been equipped and I have listened very carefully. My observations may not reflect that I've listened carefully, but I'll try. Looking at the wording in the programme for government, which is very interesting, one of my initial thoughts was beware the asset strippers, because that has been an issue in England, again in other parts of the UK, that this investment in property, which you have now and might be extended, I think you might need some very expensive lawyers, because what we've seen with if we want it to be a system that cannot easily be dismantled, there have got to be some very, very good agreements about who the assets belong to. They really, under all circumstances, remain with the state. And what we've seen with the Sure Start centres in the UK, and you probably all know what Sure Start centres are, these family resource centres that were initially very successful, some very good, Professor Marmot mentioned, very good long-term outcomes of that particular way of doing things. But as he said, over 1,000 closed, and they just went to the private sector. And indeed, my not-for-profit chain has got a couple of the buildings which were new built facilities, which local authorities completely strapped for cash. A, they couldn't run them, and B, they wanted rid of them so they didn't have to maintain them. So I think taking a longer term view, in many cases, these assets were much more interest to investors than the services that were being run in them. Their services were almost an excuse. You see that very strongly in the Netherlands, about who ends up with those assets, and does something completely different with them. Now, obviously Hazel is the expert on this. I don't know what the position is in Ireland at the moment in terms of the arrangements that you've got, to secure the state's assets. But it's something to bear in mind, and maybe, it wasn't what you were looking for, but I'd just been thinking about that, looking at the wording in the programme for government.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, we will bear that in mind. Yeah. Okay, so please join me in a round of applause to thank our speakers. An inspirational keynote for this afternoon, Professor Lloyd, Hazel for her follow-up keynote, and also Francis, Dara, Michelle and Naomi for their insights, and all of you for your participation. It's been a really fascinating day. We started off looking at the opportunities in further development of a child health workforce. Then we moved on to looking at the case for a public model of early childhood education and care, which has multiple complexities, some of which we've heard about this afternoon. Underscoring all of that is, the stark figure of 250,000 children in a wealthy country like ours living in forced deprivation. But the overlay, I think, from all of us in this room, and given the phenomenal work that you all do on a day-to-day basis, is that I would like us to carry that. That quote that Professor Marmot used, the Václav Havel quote, around the orientation of the spirit to disrupt that figure of 250,000, to create greater social mobility in our lifetime, not in 4 or 5 generations, and to realise our full potential as a Marmot room of dedicated professionals who believe in the possibility of social change in a collective way, regardless of our tensions and our difficulties and our challenges. Okay, so just to leave you with that thought, a huge thanks to the Children's Rights Alliance for their masterful organisation and their genius in persuading 2 phenomenal keynotes over here to give us their insights. And a thank you to all of you again. We hope this will further progress the calls that experts, the sectors and families have long called for in both of these key issues. And it remains for me to just hand it back to the Children's Rights Alliance and say safe home to all. Thank you.